Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It is 28th of October, and whether or not we get this thing up in a more timely fashion, let me just go really briefly over our Patreon page where you guys found this. I hope you guys all found this video okay. Last time, the one I finished out last week, and it actually took me like 3 or 4 days to get up and uploaded. It was the hardest time I've ever had uploading a video, and it's kind of a preamble to what we're going to be talking about today. So if you have not checked this video out, in fact, we're doing this whole series on the space factions. Let me refresh the page. For some reason, the graphics weren't coming up on my, here we go. All these starting with September 27th, about a month ago, forward, we've been talking about some space technology as it relates to Nikola Tesla, the ether, and truly what the ether has to do with propagating, the false narrative in whatever today's agenda is in getting the space paradigm up and going. So I'm doing something different today too. I'm simulcasting to DLive. So I've got the Theta stream going. I've got DLive going. I'm just practicing this with this new service. This Aircast before I upgrade to an upgrade account. I'll add a Twitch and a YouTube down here for some videos as well. But I'm still keeping this kind of Patreon focused, so I don't want to broadcast it to the large platforms. Not everything will I broadcast to the large ones. Maybe one of the Dragon Ball Z, upcoming Dragon Ball Z or Death Stranding live streams will be decoded over there. But anyway, we're talking in this video about Saturn and the Moon being used, if you recall, at the very end of it, as a harmonic device, or at least as is measured, the rings of Saturn as they would be measured, strum to indicate some sort of harmonic frequency, like a whole octave of, I guess we didn't measure octaves last time. What we measured is the radial frequencies, or the radial pinging frequency of the moons of Saturn outside of the rings themselves, creating a pattern of sorts, which creates kind of a beat. And then in addition to that, if you were to set up the rings into a relief such as this and carve it out, you would get this frequency structure in hertz and the approximate note corollary. And we've tied this, of course, to the my supposition anyway, that it has to do with this THX audience's listening frequency, or the sound itself, because it when you strum on it, it matches it immensely with immense accuracy. Is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to expand on these topics a little bit today, and explain why this may be plausible in terms of hypothesis of that I have, that Saturn is a mind control device that works alongside the moon. Hi, Hippie over on Theta. We got J Farmer 9 as well. Hi to you both. Good to have you on the stream. So anyway, that's why I am telling you to go back, watch. This is a 2-hour-long video over on Patreon that you can catch up on all of these topics, but it kind of will be required for us to go into what we will be to today. We're going to tie in some Earth grid network beats that I've actually decoded from last year, and we're also going to use our sacred pentagonal angular structures, 108 degrees, 72 degrees, 36 degrees today, in terms of the decode of the V steganography. Okay, we're going to use the V as always, but then we're also going to come back to the concept of the Philosopher's Stone, and of course, the Merkaba structure, Saturn's cube, but some really cool things happening in terms of some technology coming out as it relates to this Philosopher's Stone concept, and something that how would you put it? A contemporary, there we go, contemporary inventor by the name of Cliff High is figuring out, which we're also going to look into. So Not to be left undone, we are still in the middle of the Mercury retrograde as we're tracking, of course, right? We are right here, 28th. Mercury goes back direct on the 3rd, and we can anticipate that some things are going to be quite in flux until then, okay? So where we're going to start today is right where we left off, because it was kind of a hard stop last time. We didn't totally get through my explanation as to why I thought this kind of freaks me out. And the reason this whole concept of Saturn potentially being a musical instrument of sorts that works together with the moon to control the things that we've got going on down on Earth has a lot to do with Hans Jenny's work. Hans Jenny, he's a guy that wrote this. This is his seminal work, Cymatics. It's the science of sound. Okay, so I'll even just read you the opening leaf, and then I'll go through a couple things here. Hans Jenny, he died in 1872. He was a Renaissance man in every sense of the word. He was a medical doctor, artist, pianist, philosopher, historian, physical scientist, and researcher. He had an insatiable curiosity embraced in all fields of human endeavor, and his substantial talent and acumen helped him master many of them. He traveled widely in his native Switzerland and throughout the world, meeting and blah, 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 blah. As a natural scientist, Dr. Jenny explored the diversity of life forms, always with an eye toward wholeness. His insight into the unforeseen forces lay in his ability to perceive the distinctive characteristics of the individual, as well as the archetypal form. So that's what I was looking to get to. The archetypal form, myth, right? Myth is what we talk about so much. In terms of decoding steganography appropriately, we actually have to have some basis in archetype or myth, which translates this meaning across time. Saturn being the keeper of time. We'll come back to that throughout the episode. But firmly rooted in phenomenology, he was at the same time on the leading edge of systems thinking. His grasp of the history of science and philosophy gave him a vast perspective. So he was challenging basically the way by which physics expresses itself as a math, because he was finding a lot of anomalous ways in which nature behaves when he would look at certain results of experiments relating to sound. And the results of the experiments that I'm referring to had a lot to do with the shapes that things would take on. So I'll give you an example. So, for instance, you see these lattice structures. He had a method of scientific exploration where he would put sand on stretched out diaphragms, essentially. He would make makeshift diaphragms out of all manner of different materials like canvas and silks, and he would experiment. He would make sure to test different materials with the same frequency, different frequencies with the same material, and what he found out was essentially the way by which the ether operates. So what he did was he interfaced, he created an abstraction layer such that the fabric that Hans Jenny was experimenting with, the very fabric, would become the thing by which the signal was transmitted. You can see these structures, even on the front here. These wonderfully geometrical structures that were created out of these experiments. And we're not going to go too deeply into Hans Jenny today. I have a whole book here that we'll eventually get into. It's textbook length. And it's very picture heavy because of the experiments. But this is kind of similar to something we've talked about before. We've talked about Masaru Emoto's work with water before, and water being, and we'll get into water today as well without getting into Masaru Emoto's work, but water being the template by which consciousness can imbue certain qualities. And because it has such a close tie with the consciousness field, it would seem it's a reflection of the life geometry itself, the thing that humans manifest, this water bag that we carry our consciousness around in. There seems to be a certain tie to the way that operates within the ether. So talking about ether science, we're talking about the fabric by which things can perturbate or ripple effectively, right? Ripples of sounds. And so ether being the correct perspective to have when relating to this concept of metaphysics and attempting to figure out what the heck dark matter is or make sense of Einstein's theories of relativity, we needn't go any further than Nikola Tesla, the ether, C.P. Steinmetz, and the calculations that perfected Nikola Tesla's inventions, and James Clerk Maxwell's original kind of work in that realm that Nikola Tesla parlayed all of his inventions out of. And of course, we can't forget about Roger Boscovich, who wrote Theoria Naturalis, which is the conceptual framework by which all of these men kind of gathered an understanding of the ether. And academia to this day is still arguing about these facts. I mean, we're still arguing over propulsion technology being just something that you can go faster with, more explosions. And this is not the elegant way by which things operate. And also, when we're dealing with mind control, the ether itself as a fabric, a diaphragm, if you might imagine being strummed at a certain frequency, much like cymatics, you have a result on the other end. So what we're talking about here is ultimately in the mind, what is the effect of an ether perturbation that sends a musical signal alongside something as large as the moon that has an actual measurable magnetic effect, quite measurable magnetic effect on the bioelectric energy field of the human, plus all of these planet-wide effects, the tidal effect, these types of things. You have to wonder what's going on, right? And it lends a lot more, it begs a lot more questions than answers at the beginning of this episode anyway, that relate back to the work that I suggested to you all last year when I started posting stuff to YouTube. It was at the foundation of even all the V-steganography, which is the Earth grid network, which is the way in which the telluric currents carry the energy alongside this invisible lattice work of the Earth itself, and how it can be used as a weapon against the people that are on the very ley line structures that are built on these temples, stadiums, government facilities. All my early work from last year demonstrates this quite clearly, and I may do a wrap-up summary video of those concepts sometime soon in like a documentary format, so people can learn a little bit more about that, because it seems to be something I have to go back and reference a lot more lately. But I mention it because I got back into playing this Death Stranding game, which I stopped playing around this time last year, only to pick up again a week and a half ago, because it had way too many loose ends related to the current threads that we're talking about with Saturn right now. There's way too much Saturn symbolism in that game and the Earth grid for us to ignore it. Hi, Rushi. How are you, dude? It's good to see you, Rushi Corp. We are simulcasting over on DLive today too, Rushi. If you care to give me a follow over there just for chagrins, I'm going to be doing a little bit more simulcasting on Twitch and YouTube and such too, after I get kind of the hiccups and stuff out of today's. But I won't be doing the Patreon stuff on the bigger platforms like Twitch and YouTube. I'll be remaining on DLive and Theta for that, by the way. Just a little bit of an update for you having logged in here. And I'm good. Thank you for asking. I finally was able to put my thoughts together to do this video. Stuff is happening actually at the speed of, I don't know. Like, I didn't have a good representation of what it is, the speed of, like, things are happening incredibly quickly right now, and it's tough for me to do all the stuff that I have to do to make a living on a daily basis, plus get my head around this stuff, which I actually think is more important than the actual work that I do right now, is getting these notes out to you guys. Even though it's a small audience, I don't know, there's like some sort of a pull to get more and more of these done. And I have been doing Patreon heavy stuff lately, as you can see over on the YouTube channel. I was just about to say, I will not be posting as often over here, but I will be posting a couple current war updates in the weeks or the week to come, because there's some stuff over there as well. But all of this is back to the main point at hand, guys. That it's time is the meme. Time, space, time, like, is not the fabric of the ether. This is a false perspective that Einstein carried forth, and it's almost our responsibility to get back the knowledge that was lost and have the correct perspective that Tesla did, so we can invent our way out of this friggin' mess. And we're gonna get there today. I mean, Cliff High, for those of you who know how much I love the man, Cliff High, he came up with a video yesterday where we have hope, actually, and it actually has everything to do, again, with the Philosopher's Stone, the cymatics, ether fabric concept we're talking about. It doesn't have anything to do with proving whether or not Saturn is an instrument or not. But these thoughts that I'm tying together at the beginning of the episode here are only meant to give you, the viewer, a primer from last time as to why cymatics, the ether fabric, and these consciousness field effects matter even to the Templars. So, without further ado, everybody, I didn't reference enough last time either. This piece that I need to share with everybody, maybe in the description or highlight better in my Patreon channel, because over in the as everybody is also aware, I in Patreon anyway, I upgraded the patron tiers. I've got a $5 and a $15 tier. 5 gets you into the Discord channel so you can talk to your other community members. 15 gets you into the private Evernote research board server. Of course, I shared this last time where I've got 1,200 different documents, images, esoteric things to apply the V-steganography to, and kind of work with people within the community. Within this Evernote, I'm going to be referencing things pretty frequently from here on out. But this steganography PDF is in there, is why I reference this. If you've got that $15 level, you've already got access to this just to read and kind of annotate. But this is a really, really, really good primer. The best thing I've ever found to explain, not the best thing I've ever found, the most scientifically minded document maybe that I found to elegantly explain steganography in something that's not 100 pages long. So I want you guys to see something. This is just what we do. It's what we have been doing for a year as I've been training you guys in the art of steganography to the best of my ability. I've been getting a little bit better at it along the way. But introduction, the word steganography is defined as covered writing, or the technique of hiding messages inside other messages. It's derived from the Greek word FJ, LT. This is the idea that hiding is not a novelty. It has been used for centuries all across the world under different regimes, but to date, it is still unknown to most people. It is a tool for hiding information so it does not even appear to exist. And this is what steganography is, whether it's a glyph, whether it's an image, whether it's an intonation or an incantation. An intonation meaning like the way something is said, or an incantation meaning, like a mantra. There are all sorts of different things to do. You hide information in the consciousness field itself with steganography. That's what's so incredible about it, because you can't necessarily decode it with a computer. AI won't be able to ever give the full representation of what is being said. You have to use good old-fashioned, brain-powered critical thinking to get to the bottom of this stuff. Reason I'm saying this is because, again, we're referencing the Templars later, and I want, in just a minute here, and I want to give everybody a context for what this is all about. So in modern times, steganography can be looked into as the study of the art and science of communicating in a way which hides the existence of the communication, and has until recently been the poor cousin of cryptography. So they're related in a way to cryptography. Cryptography is different because you can kind of establish relevant formulas, and you can necessarily, as I understand it, find ways to enlist AI to decrypt your cryptographic programming by brute force in a lot of ways. Steganography is more elegant. Myth is not something you can decode with brute force because the meaning itself is contextual, and the context of the meaning is consciousness. So cryptography is just a way of abstracting that consciousness one more layer in a way that is a little bit more functionally and concretely tangible. Okay? So currently, there are two directions within steganography. One of the branches is used for protection against detection, while another is used for protection against removal. The latter option is used to place hidden trademarks in images, music, and software. It's a technique referred to as watermarking. So watermarking is just a technique of, preventing against, plagiarism. So it can be used against plagiarism, but it can also be used to convey secret meanings as we decode in V. So today it is gaining new popularity with the current industry demand for digital watermarking and fingerprinting, blah, 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 blah. So they even go in here to share covered writing in covert channels. This is the hiding against or hiding for. And again, so steganography, I mean to put this into place because I want people to know that from here on in, like we shouldn't cloud, because I've heard in discussion boards on some of my on some of my interviews that I've been doing with Corey at the Phoenix Enigma, my own stuff. I don't want people to get the idea that steganography is used for evil. It's not an evil thing. It's just a way to occlude and hide things so that the information is kept intact and not changed. In fact, it's a form of blockchain in a way, if you really reduce it down to this, because it's a way to verify the original message without letting the game of telephone get in the way to occlude what that meaning was. I hope it's the most elegant explanation I can give. But it's important to know that information is hidden for good reasons sometimes, especially as it relates to our friends, the Templars. Okay? So that's establishing item number one. And might as well go with some Templar symbolism here. There we go. Let's get our Templar dudes up. So these guys, the Templars, have something to do with the V steganography itself. And I think today we're going to explore them having invented the V steganography. I'm starting to think they may have invented it because of the way their connection with the sacred goddess and the V's connection with the sacred goddess. But we won't suppose on that yet. We actually have a couple threads to close out from last time, okay? Because part of the whole agenda behind the Ether technology coming out is this whole banking system collapse too that we are covering. There's so much that's going on. I'm doing my best to weave a lot of different memes together. The banking collapse, the space paradigm that's shifting, the new technology that's coming out and teaching people what that is, the ancient faction wars that are on the earth, and the power jockey that's happening, and the very prophetic events that we're living through that are either a combination of being ritualized into existence or happening by way of the prophecies themselves simply being accurate. Okay? Prophecies that extend even past the biblical context. We're not going to reduce it simply to the biblical prophecies, I guess is all I'll say on that. But we start with something I'd intended to put on the last video. Joseph Farrell's going to factor heavily on in early this video too, because there are a couple clips. He was interviewed by Dark Journalist a couple weeks ago, speaking to a lot of these topics. And then additionally, he did an interview with Catherine Austin Fitz, and this was something that we are also going to take a look at pretty much directly right after this. We're going to parlay. I'll lend my thoughts like I always do, but we're going to parlay those findings from these videos straight into our Templar research for the day and show kind of where I think this world is going as we get into the end of the year and what we might start to find in terms of secrets revealed, the history mystery coming becoming solved. So, dark journalist Daniel List, the ex-steganography expert, he's talking to Joseph Farrell here about the finance, the crime and finance that's going to lead into the clip that I play after this, which is relevant to the hiding of all this technology. Okay, so it's all connected. We're gonna get to a couple crypto related topics in addition to this today, of course, but. Well, let's just listen to the prompting here, and Daniel and Joseph are going to riff on the banking system for a minute and why it matters.
But no one knows at the mega level, at the level of the big banks, how to run such a system.
Because their model is a scarcity model.
Their model is.
By the way, just not to jump in here, they're talking about the space system, the orbital system, the system that is being invented with the ether technology, with the military-industrial complex, ever since the Kennedy assassination or even before. Let's talk World War II, maybe, right around when Nikola Tesla died, let's say. Okay, so that's kind of the setup, is just to be perfectly abundantly clear.
It's a scarcity model.
Wow.
Closed system physics, closed system economics. Always, always, always. Open system physics, open system economics.
So there's the first point to make here. This is something I tell everybody in blockchain. Everybody, in fact, more and more people are coming to me for consulting for my expertise in the security space related to blockchains. It's a perspective thing. Like it's like people are starting to look into certain projects that are quote unquote asset backed, let's say. Okay. And they don't really know what these things mean. Asset-backed means nothing if you're in a closed system. You have to be in an open system like blockchain in order for that to have any basis in reality. Because in an open system, it has to check itself against something else. In a closed system, you can make that check into whatever you want it to be. The validation mechanism, the regulatory mechanism. So this is an into the weeds. This is more of a crypto discussion to have, but there's your first corollary and why crypto and space are synonymous with each other. And perhaps again, how we're going to tie this to the Templars and how they're involved with, I think in my educated conclusion that I've been able to draw, at least involved in the messaging campaign of steganography, with the overlay on the top of these topics. In the V steganography, of course, occludes both the mind control and the ether itself underlying this stuff. The X steganography is more the programmatic things on top of the how of the mind control, but so it has a mind control component to it. But the X is also the programs, the secrets themselves as it relates to the dossiers, to the very dark programs of how X relates to Hermetic times in Egypt. There's a little bit of a study that we're going to be doing in a future series called the Hooked X, where X and V steganography are both present, where you have an X and you have a V, almost like in an exponential, like in the placement that an exponent signifier would be if you're looking at mathematics. So like if you're looking at 2 squared and where the 2 would be for the squared, that's where the V is at this for this X glyph. And it was used extensively in Nordic traditions. Okay. I'm bouncing all over the place here, guys, because I've got a lot to set up and tie together. This is all going to relate to different topics throughout this video. So I'll shut up. There's your open system corollary. I still have 10 minutes left of this clip before we're done with it. So again, I just, Joseph is pointing out how interesting it is, and he's not saying anything about open system relating to Bitcoin. I'm the one telling you that. He didn't make that connection. He doesn't actually believe in Bitcoin. Like, well, not even believe in it. Nobody should just believe in anything. He doesn't grasp Bitcoin yet. So you won't hear him saying anything to that extent. Either way, here he is to continue with the thought and why it's significant.
Always, always, always.
Incredible.
Yeah. Incredible.
And this brings us, it's funny because one thing we were talking about the bearer bonds in there.
Uh-huh.
The bearer bonds contained, in this peculiar case, they contained the face of John F. Kennedy on the front.
Yeah.
And on the back, they showed rockets taking.
This illusion that Daniel is pointing at is a counterfeit campaign that was run in the 60s, 70s with the face of Kennedy on the bonds themselves, which would signify before cryptocurrencies potentially the markers of the secret off-the-books system for financing early on in the early days this off-world breakaway civilization, space tech, technologies, space tech, military force based on Nikola Tesla's technology. They were claimed to be counterfeits, but you don't like anybody who's ever counterfeit anything. You don't counterfeit something that's not real. So saying that these things were counterfeits, that these bonds, these Kennedy bonds that they're about to talk about, were counterfeit. The popular conclusion on it is that they're counterfeit. Doesn't resonate very well with me, because if they're counterfeit, that means that they're counterfeit of the same thing that's an actual real item, which doesn't refute the existence of the off books system. It's an incomplete explanation for why these things exist. So go look it up. I'm not going to get off topic too much more with this, with the Kennedy and NASA bond note, but it's interesting that it is a thing.
Taking off for the moon.
They showed the space shuttle.
Yeah.
They showed the moon, and they showed the lunar excursion module.
Why were those on those bearer bonds, in your opinion, Joseph?
I think it was a message, because those bonds that were allegedly part of that first Italian bearer bonds story, where the Italian Guardia di Finanza recovered $134.5 billion worth of bearer bonds being smuggled by 2 Japanese men into Switzerland.
Right.
The Kennedy bonds were supposedly the bonds that were recovered. But when you dig into those Kennedy bonds, they're appearing out of a trading house, I believe it was located at the time in Indonesia, that specialized in trading sovereign securities. And it was called Money World. Okay?
Yes.
And they were the ones that put these things out there. And I have to wonder if they were indeed fake, that they knew, if you're trading in that kind of stuff, you may have picked up a little intelligence along the way that maybe there's a hidden bond market out there and people are trading gobs of sums of money completely off the books, kind of like Prime Minister Tanaka in Japan with his little bond scheme. And they put it out there. And then the people that picked up the story and ran with it was East Asian News or something like that, which incidentally is a Vatican-run media outlet.
That's the long arm.
That's the long arm of the Vatican Bank, and they've never been up to any financial malfeasance. But
so there's our Vatican tie-in, guys. The Fox faction, right in the middle of all of it, of course. Easy to paint the picture of the Fox faction v. steganography. It's it's not difficult in this context.
Poor Pope Francis, inherits this mess. And what does he do? He turns around and hires as the auditing firm for the Vatican Bank the same accounting firm for the Bank of International Settlements.
Wow.
So in other words, I think, and here I'm in agreement with Catherine. We kind of bumped into the same thing, noticing all of this money that's gone missing and sloshing around in the system somewhere, but we're coming at it from two very different approaches. But, you know, when I started examining this hidden system of finance and its connection to deep state politics, what I concluded was, okay, this system has grown so big that it's now really taking over everything in sight.
Oh,
Hence FASB 56.
yes.
Because if it's gone that big and appears to be possible to break out into public consciousness, everybody's going to want an accounting. So we've got to keep this buttoned up tight until we get the whole financial system shifted.
So there's your, and of course, as we've talked about, FASB 56, the accounting standard exception rule that the U.S. Congress passed in 2018 when Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings were going on. This is the kind of the landmark finding over the last few years of Catherine Austin Fitz's off-world planetary financial structure, and the same conclusions are what Joseph Farrell draws. But here's our closed system of finance. The point is here: closed system of finance cannot just make a transition to an open system of finance like blockchain, which is what we need if we're going to be in space for so many reasons. But just look at mining. Mining itself, we've talked about this too. If there's a mining operation that grabs gold, silver, platinum, whatever from asteroids up there, what are they going to bring it back to the Earth and value it against? It will inflate the value of the very thing that we use to peg value to, the precious metals, because you're increasing the supply. So you need something that does not have a propensity for an increased supply. You need something that is totally verifiable, cannot have its ledger change, all of the properties Bitcoin has. You run down the list. Bitcoin is the only way that you can back a system like that with currency. It doesn't mean it's the only technology for the new distributed ledger future. It means that's the only one you can use as currency, hard money. So this needs to be established. We need all of this to happen. To transition over to this, we need to go from a meme of closed system to open system. This is an absolutely difficult thing to do. Beyond money, psychologically, people don't like this. This is what the nanny state's all about. This is what socialism is. Like, it's a closed system of all of your needs being met. There's no other possibility outside of it. And people's critical thinking gets squandered. Their survivability gets squandered. Their everything that is human about them gets quashed. So it's a good thing that this is all happening and that it's causing so much disruption, I think. But it's friggin' tough to live through when nobody wants to look at it the way that we do here in the vCyber community. But a couple minutes ahead, I'm gonna fast forward to 2 hours and 10 minutes because they talk about this for some time. But then at around 2 hours and 10 minutes, they discuss the technology components of it itself, and this is the part that's most responsive to what we're discussing today.
On their circulation. In other words, these things can circulate internationally.
Right.
He's speaking of dollars.
Talk about taking dead aim. Now, let's compare Kennedy to Trump.
Yes.
Since we're talking deep state politics here.
Right.
If you look at these bailouts, is Trump funding these by debt-free money?
Quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. That, to me, is a telltale sign that it may be one faction of the deep state, but don't wait for any big upset of the apple cart.
Right.
Right.
Trump's not going to put it all on the line because it'll sacrifice everything that he's got.
Right. Right.
Political
and the other problem here is assuming Trump wins the election.
Yeah.
Okay. Assuming that he does, how does he behave? He'll be at that point a lame duck president. All the shackles are off.
Right.
So what does he do financially? And again, we don't really have much of a clue. There's all this hope pouring out there. Oh, he's going to nationalize the Fed and so on and so forth. But the problem when you nationalize things like that is just like the Bolsheviks in Russia. You have to go out and buy the stock.
Right.
Where's the market for shares of the Federal Reserve? What do the certificates look like? Who has them? How do you know if they're genuine?
And again, Joseph Farrell is alluding to this secret financing structure being there, meaning this system's clearly in place. This elusive, there would have to be a stock certificate that represents the value of the Fed in order for this whole thing to work. We don't have a public market for those notes. So where do they get traded? So he's tying this whole thing back to the secret system of finance that keeps this all afloat. This is that secret system of finance. That so-called stock on the value of what the Fed is able to print is this value that then gets funneled and traded for the IOUs in the bond structure. Something has to be produced in order for those to gain a return. So what gets produced? Space stuff. The only thing that explains the massive amount of return back from the void, it would seem, where this value comes back from, to hit the public again. And we're all none the wiser. Pretty crazy.
Well, they're all unanswered questions.
All unanswered questions. They're huge ones. And it boggles my mind that no one, Daniel, who's talked about the Federal Reserve and all the banker shenanigans surrounding it, has ever mentioned the certificates, what they look like, how they're validated, where they're traded, and how they're adjudicated. What's the jurisdiction that would resolve any contractual disputes?
Where's the precedent in law?
Where's the precedent in law? Bingo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. This is X Series 98, a Deep State Target USA with Dr. Joseph Farrell. And we've gone from October surprises to that deep system of finance. Yes.
There's one more thing. There is a precedent with dealing with privately chartered equity central banks in this country.
Okay.
The Second Bank of the United States.
Oh.
Andrew Jackson.
Right.
Whose statue Trump prominently displays in the Oval Office.
That's true.
That's true. Now, how did Jackson handle it? He's got the same problem. Who owns the stock? Does Jackson nationalize the Second Bank of the United States? Well, if he had tried that tack, he would have had to buy the stock.
Right.
What did the certificates look like? Who held them? How many were held? On what market were they traded? And how are they adjudicated?
The mystery of this.
Jackson's response was very clever. He simply refused to renew the charter. You can have all the stock in the bank you want, and the bank can do whatever it wants, but it's no longer the bank or agent of the United States government.
So pulling the rug out from underneath the Fed. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. This is what Jackson did. He had several attempts made in his life. He survived them. The guy was a badass. He was kind of a dick, but he was a badass. I'm talking about Andrew Jackson. The other guy, of course, did die. Abraham Lincoln that did this. I think they actually speak to this in the first place. But is this what's coming? I mean, the greenback was a labor-backed monetary unit that was backed by the production of whoever was going to attain those things. It's similar to what the Germans set up after World War I, when the country was ravaged and they owed all the debts for the war reparations. This was how actually their country reestablished itself so quick.
Government.
When did he let it go?
1830. I want to say 36, but I'm not certain.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. Now, Jackson was not a nice guy, let's admit.
Yeah.
Marching thousands of Indians, several states in the dead of winter with bare feet is not a nice guy. Okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes not being a nice guy works if you're dealing with central bankers.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
if you read his letters and correspondences with Martin Van Buren of all people.
President Van Buren.
President Van Buren was an ambassador at the time, one of Jackson's ambassadors, and by the way, the first president to be photographed. But
Interesting.
yeah, he was the first president to be photographed. But Jackson's writings on this whole thing are fascinating because you can tell he knows what he's dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
You are a den of vipers. That's kind of strong language. And I'm going to root you out.
Do you kind of go with that theory that these, central banks, the London moneyed powers, they lost in the revolution, and they have ever since been trying to capture America back, and that at this point, with the central bank action, they're in a position to retake America from this Revolutionary War period to now?
I do ascribe some credibility to that for a very simple reason. When you look at the Morgan interests involved in establishing the Federal Reserve, that's a clue right there, because Morgan had, at that time, had very definite connections with the city. It had worked out numerous special relationships with British finance. And when we say that at that time, well, that's Barclays and Lloyds and Rothschild. So the Morgan interest to me is the key, that you've got those kinds of British high financial interests involved in the Federal Reserve, specifically Barclays, Lloyds, and Barings at the time, which was still in existence, and then, of course, the Rothschild interests. So,
and of course, we're going to dive into right after this clip. Actually, not right after this clip. After another clip of Joseph Farrell with Catherine Austin Fitts, is tying that together. That together with the Morgan interests in this period of time that we're living through, and looking at the ancient structures of the families of Venus, the Venus families that the Alan Butler is so called, and all they are is the ancient Hermetic Pythagorean schools, is what it would seem. To pass along this knowledge through steganography to reach us now, to reset the banks with their interests in mind. And why might that be the case? I want you to sit on that for a sec, because these points are all tied up very, very nicely with the distraction events that are going on to run kind of like protection control with the popular consciousness of people, with riots and weather and all sorts of nutty stuff, while a war is being fought right under our noses using the very technology that we're speculating on, it would seem. And how is this all tied together? Well, this is before we gander a guess or a hypothesis. It's more an educated hypothesis here about how it is these Venus families might be involved. You tap into the book right after we listen to this clip. But to set this up, Catherine and Joseph are talking about the crisis that we face as this is happening, as the financial collapse is happening, and why it's confusing and why people can't open their eyes to it, because all the stuff else, all the other stuff that's happening is going on at such a rapid pace, is overwhelming them so that they have no hope to understand.
To secede from Canada.
yeah, I don't know, because he's doing a damn good job of it. And if I were Canadian, I wouldn't blame him. I just wouldn't. But yeah, it's making me think that they're sending signals again about what they may want to do.
Okay, question number 11. What will happen to U.S. land and real estate as a result of changes underway? What about the existing energy model? Will energy delivered by wireless technology at low cost be implemented soon?
I think that's part of 5G.
Yeah.
I think it's part of wireless power.
New Zealand just announced they're doing
Wireless
a
power.
prototype of wireless, the delivery of wireless power.
Wireless power. Again, the delivery of wireless power. What does this have to do with the delivery of ether perturbations also from a planetary structure? I'm not suggesting humans are doing that, by the way. I'm suggesting that even the people on Earth that we look to as the overclass, the elites, I just don't see them having any diplomatic pull with whoever the heck those craft belong to that are creating the rings of Saturn. Different story different speculations for different days. We're only going to speak to the ancient recovery of what was lost in these videos for a while, because the how it happened is a different story.
Folks, we're talking Nikola Tesla.
Right.
1888. The idea was there. The science was there. The technology was there. So why didn't it get implemented?
Because they couldn't centrally bill for it.
That?
It was a billing issue.
No, it was a weaponization issue.
Right, and weaponization.
And I think they think now that they've got the means and wherewithal to control it. Again, I'm skeptical. I don't think they do.
Well, but here's the thing. If you're charging $100 a month for electricity,
Mm-hmm.
and now with the smart grid, you bring in wireless energy,
Mm-hmm.
you can keep charging $100,
Right.
dramatically lower your cost, and rake in
Right.
everything as profit.
Right. Right.
Right.
I think that's part of the game, definitely. Right. And like Tesla said when he was proposing his system, and if you get out of order, we can always turn off your power. And if you keep persisting, we can always just zap you.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, here's the question. What did the delivery of wireless energy have to do with those animals dropping out of the sky?
I think there's a connection.
Right.
Because you can have animals dropping dead when lightning strikes the ground.
Right.
Right? Particularly during a thunderstorm.
Right.
But, it's been speculated upon ever since HARP came online that you can use that system to create regional dipoles in the atmosphere and just rain lightning down.
This is actually not so dissimilar to what is believed happened at Tunguska. Nikola Tesla creating a big spark gap between the sky and the ground by creating a differential, a delta, as it's called in Greek, between the two charge polarities. That differential, if cranked up high enough, creates a sudden jarring of or kind of like a conduit. It's the word I was looking for. Creates the conduit for plasma reactivity. This is just kind of like a shift or not really a rift, but an immensely violent pressure perturbation in the ether. Again, we're talking ether perturbations, which causes the activation of that energy current. So we're discussing the same thing relating to the weather warfare, the technologies that are up there, what Tesla warned was going to happen with wireless transmission. These are all problems of our day. These are the modern civic issues of our day. Call it what you will. If in 5 years we're not all debating about these topics as to their validity, something will have gone terribly wrong. We're talking about climate change and all this crap now. We have to responsibly get past all that to get to this. It's all part of the financial reset. But there's one more statement he's got here on weather warfare before he's got a couple choice things to say with her on Antarctica. And by the way, this is their second part interview for the Q3 wrap up over on Catherine's Solari report. publication.
If that dipole is strong enough. And I think that's very, very possible. So, you're dealing with the technology and an idea that's been around for a very long time. The physics has been there. So there's really nothing to it. You couple that capability with a wireless power system loading energy into the atmosphere. And people have to understand something. Wireless power is simply the flip of the electronic circuit that's used in every electronic circuit. The power goes out through the wire and is returned through what? The ground. All Tesla did was flip it. The ground became the atmosphere, and the atmosphere became the ground. So you're using the Earth itself to beam the power out, and you're using the atmosphere to return it. So you've got loads of energy flowing through the atmosphere.
Could that help explain our ley line, energy grid, network effects? Yes. Yes, it can. If you're loading a circuit with energy, that energy gets transmitted along the circuit. So you can use the Earth as a transceiver, is what Joseph Farrell is talking about. And this is all Nikola Tesla is, using the Earth as a transceiver. So that is all that would be required in order to unlock the potential of the ether for this Earth. But unfortunately for Nikola Tesla, and as we found out, is that the Earth grid was already hijacked a long time ago. Can't use something that somebody else is already using for a much different purpose. And I think this really gets to the heart. Not, of course, like the not metering thing of Nikola Tesla's technology. The weaponization thing, yes, is definitely part of it. I think the you can't meter it thing is just kind of, like a happenstance, cop-out. But the more parsimonious explanation to me as to why his technology never took off because the bandwidth was being occupied by something else, and something else did not want to step aside to allow this new technology to be the new order of the day. So Shaft said mentioned the alert, so I didn't come in right away. I have to catch the replay. Oh yeah. Sorry, Chef. I really, really do apologize. I forgot to update the title before I hit stream. And there's no going back after I do that. Once I hit stream on the title, it goes to the email for everybody, and my notification system gets rendered incorrect if I have to change the title again. So I apologize for not being more specific about that. But you only missed, I don't know, maybe a half hour or so. Anyway, that's kind of what we're talking about here, and why, and what is that system occupied with? We've been discussing for a long time, like I led in this video, the Earth Grid network. I called it the Earth Grid Parasite Network as it goes along with that video game that Shaf is talking about, Death Stranding. I've been streaming over here on Theta as well, and there are some things that we're gonna jump to after this, but. The concept that everybody's hopefully been waiting for it has to do with the Templars. The Templars, I forgot to push this too. So before we get to the Templars, Antarctica is a slight component of what's going on here too. I might close out the video with the Antarctica clip. The Antarctica clip that they're speaking of here at 3 hours and like 36 minutes in is basically when it goes more to the 22s, the 17s, the V steganography we were finding with this supposedly, fake story relating to this octopus incident, this other being incident at Lake Vostok down in Antarctica. But maybe we'll do that for the next video, because I think the next video is actually going to have more of an Antarctica tinge to it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to move on. We're going to keep on the conscious thought of Templars so we don't lose it. And I am going to start showing you guys some of my raw research. This is some of more... this is some of my research that I don't have as much of a conclusion about, because it's kind of a work in progress. Then I usually present things that are more put together than today. But I'm still referencing this Venus Families book about how the goddess energy got sapped from the earth. And I'm still trying to find some time to decode further the Isis Horus mystery that we talked about last time as well. I don't have a ton of time this next week even to probably get into that too much. So I'm going to make a couple of statements that are throughout the rest of this that are not so tried and tested even in my own critical thinking, but they're interesting. Okay? This is all happening, all of this timing that we're doing, even this video, is happening at the onset of the season 2 of The Mandalorian, okay? Mandalorian is something I've argued is very heavy in V-steganography. It goes back to this episode on YouTube I did 10 months ago. Only got 140 views, but it has a lot to do with the Mandaeans, a lot of ancient Mesopotamia, whoever the gods of Eden were in Andrew Collins' work, the Watchers. Okay, and what it tells the story of, and what I was painting in the first season of The Mandalorian, is an ancient society, an ancient secret society that necessarily had to go underground to preserve their way of life, their knowledge, and their creed. So this is a lot like the Mandalorians, or a lot like the Mandaeans, who have a cross pollination with the Templars, who seem to have. The Templars, by the way, seems to be a term for time warrior. Is my new thing I'm playing with. Temporal, anything related to do with time. Templar, time is related with Saturn. Okay, so I'm starting to play around with the idea that the Templars have known about this Saturnian construct, maybe even the possible race that is creating the things around Saturn that we've been talking about in these videos. And for a time, the only way that they could defend against it is carrying the knowledge along, not able to apply this ancient knowledge because our ability to apply it was lost. Similar to these Mandalorians, who season 2 is coming out of The Mandalorian. Mandalorian is got a lot of Nordic symbolism. We've talked about the X and the V. The hooked X, some point in this video, is a Nordic glyph. The X and the V were both also used in various ways in Nordic glyphs. But the Mandalorian has all these tie-ins to this, and it has all these tie-ins to the Templars. And it is the Mandalorian in the show is carrying the child, and the child is representative of the youngness of the human race. Is what I've determined, right? Based on the green Merkaba energy in the heart, which is when you look at it's just a small. Let me get chakra system. Here we go. Get a better representation of the chakra system. Do you see how there's a Merkaba in the middle of this, guys? The Star of David. This is the Christ consciousness. So this is what we're supposed to be resonating at as humans. It's what Jesus challenged the human race to save themselves by doing. Here, I can do it, you can do it too, was his whole lesson, right? So this is us, and we're being protected by the Templars and the knowledge that we yet do not know to get to the end of our quest. Is the end of our quest to overthrow this control grid on the earth that seems to be controlling our minds by way of this instrument in Saturn. Again, wild speculation in this video. I hold these to be intuitive steps in the right direction, though. While they may not, I don't know if they're factually 100%, but there's a truth to this thread that I maintain, that I will always maintain until proven that my perspective is wrong. There's too much here with the steganography pointing at this parsimony that's leading this, right? So we have the concept of the Mandalorian. We have, of course, remember THX, the audience is listening, which is a George Lucas concept. Mandalorian is a George Lucas outfit. And I guess I implore you to go back and watch that Mandalorian episode on YouTube, my YouTube channel, because it shows a lot of the gematria that I won't get into today, but 22s and 17s and 117s, 36, 72, 108, all of those terms that all of the numerology that we find in the reset. Money, 72.27. Bitcoin, 72.36. 10 cent, 81.27. Steve Jobs, 27. So we have all the sorcery, so Beskar steel. Beskar steel is 17. So Beskar steel is the thing that represents silver in the show of the Mandalorian. It is 72.36. 117. Might as well just show you guys something that was in the news. Another hit from earlier. The supposedly retired F-117 Night Hawk. Something, again, a hit from my predictions earlier in the year when we were looking at the 22s and the 117s and the 36s and the Seahawks. Nighthawk, Seahawk. We went over their 5-0 record last time in the video, in the Saturn video. That's all outlined in there. So you can kind of clearly follow this thread if you really do go back and look. This is what the numerology and chronological components are all based out of. Okay, so this is actually interesting because the series starts again on the 30th. So it's this Friday we get the new episode, and we'll start to figure out this whole series again, which I'm pretty excited about. What is being said in terms of the broadcast for real life is really all we're looking for. Okay, so the goddess religion is what's being taken away from this story, and what we have is in the Venus Family book. What I have for you is the part where I'm talking about, where I found the tie-in with the Nordics. So check this out, guys. I'm on, again, page 128, Venus Family book, talking about some of the ancient ways in which Venus is significant to the Freemasons and some other things, right? We're really truncating what the entirety of what this book is all about by not giving it a ton of justice. But I start when it says, there's a high degree of secrecy relating to certain aspects of Algonquin practices, which they're talking about, kind of related in a similar way to what we're discussing here. They're not for the eyes of outsiders. Okay? When Thomas Jefferson became the third president of the United States, he was in office from 1801 to 1809. He showed a great interest in the vastness of the continent that lay beyond the borders of the 13 original states, and the new republic was able to purchase a vast area of land from the Napoleonic government of France, which became known as the Louisiana Purchase. I think Thomas Jefferson and Napoleon both were of this faction, and that's the reason this thing got brokered. I mean, I've also showed in a lot of the videos I've done about giants in the past how a lot of this stuff connects with the Lewis and Clark expeditions, which are mentioned in the next couple of sentences here. So this took place in 1803. Almost immediately, Jefferson dispatched his personal secretary, a man by the name of Meriwether Lewis, along with William Clark, to lead an expedition into the newly acquired area and to discover all they could about the tribes living there and the nature of the land. Many aspects of the Lewis and Clark expedition are shrouded in mystery. Lewis's journal for their travels and discoveries is missing, and a number of pages fall silent at significant points in the narrative. We've pointed this out, I think, in prior videos too. It's likely that the expedition had orders from Thomas Jefferson that were never published, and that one of their objectives was to search for the particular objects of a durable kind, quote unquote. Objects of a durable kind is what Thomas Jefferson told them to look for. To make contacts with specific tribes with whom the Templars had formerly enjoyed good relations. One tribe was the Mandan. So you've got the Mandaeans over in Mesopotamia. Mandaeans were a real specific sect of people, just like the Essenes, who carried along the Essenes' knowledge, and which was Pythagorean knowledge, as we find out. It's one and the same. All of a sudden, the Templars come along. They're artifact finders of a certain kind, of a durable kind. And they're looking for specific races of people that are already pre-existent, so they had already had contact with the Mandan, technically, right? Like, how could the Templars have had contact with the Mandan to have been in their gene pool by 1800? Only, a short time after we'd founded the country, and certainly not enough time since Columbus had landed for a lot of that stuff to happen. So it leaves one possibility, that the story of Columbus is not complete, right? So the Mandan were pushed inland, by the way. They used to be in the East Coast. They got pushed inland by a lot of the colonialism that was happening. So before a Lewis and Clark expedition, the Mandan migrated up the Missouri River because of earlier outbreaks of smallpox, and they were reduced in numbers by Lewis and Clark by the time they had encountered them. Lewis and Clark had. But they were still different from other tribes in the area. There had been little of any contact between the Mandan and Europe around the time Lewis and Clark overwintered with them, yet it was reported that many members of the tribe were fair-skinned, white. So again, here's the part that, just like the samurai, just like we're going and attempting to prove the hypothesis of that the samurai were also white. You can follow this saga in these 3 videos over on my YouTube channel, kind of culminating in the White Rabbit. This is just a channel update, so it has nothing to do with it. So where are we at? So the Knights Templar officially sanctioned as a fighting monastic order in 1129, at which time began to grow up very rapidly. They established themselves in Bristol. Bristol was not a naval city on the very west coast of the UK. And we'll never know what Lewis and Clark told President Jefferson in the private meeting concerning the Mandan, although they had certainly spent enough time with the tribe to learn anything they might want to know. The Mandan had originally lived on the St. Lawrence River. This would undoubtedly be the place where the Templars from Bristol would have come in contact with them when the Templars pre-Columbus, because starting in about 1100, they had the naval ability to ship over here, and looks like they certainly did. And over time, this tribe with the Mandan became very closely related, essentially, with the Templars. So it goes on to describe how there's something called the Kensington Rune Stone that's discussed, that was found up in Minnesota. Minnesota, the place where all the riots started this year. So Minnesota, it seems, again, the Minnesota Vikings, the Glass-Steagall Super Bowl 52 that got played in the Glass Stadium, U.S. Bank Stadium, the Glass-Steagall Super Bowl, which to me indicated the collapse of the U.S. financial system, of course. 239 was all over the rituals that year. The Eagles won the Super Bowl 52. 5 times 5 in the V steganography is 25. Reverse that is 52. So you also had, going back to the Seahawks this year, interestingly enough, I was just paying cursory attention to, they lost to the Arizona Cardinals this weekend. The Arizona Cardinals are now 5-2. The Seahawks were 5-0. If they would have gone 6-0, it would have been a different ritual. We would have been off if they would have won last week, but they didn't. They lost. 5 wins, 1 loss. There's still something to do now with also the Cardinals, the Vatican. The Vatican has the Cardinals, the Vatican. The Vatican has a huge presence here in Arizona, which is why the Arizona Cardinals are named such. And there's jockeying going back and forth. Maybe it would seem, if the results of that game would indicate. But again, the banking, Minnesota is where the Vikings are. It is where the Norse seem to have propagated from. And it seems as if the Mandan have this Norse blood in them. So partially that these Templars get conflated sometimes with the Norse. Hey, Jason 4517, how are you? Over in the Theta stream. Talking V steganography here. Thanks for joining. So the Templars themselves, in a lot of their they've got a Scottish background, and they've also got this Norse background. But the ones that we're concerning ourselves with, the Mandalorians, the Mandaeans, the ones that seem to have founded the country, that's why it matters, because it seems to have the Kensington Stone that they talk about in this book seems to be a claim on land that these Norse Templars had way before Columbus, where they placed it in the ground as land claims would be placed back then, and they placed it in such a tributary in Minnesota because all the veins and the lakes and stuff in Minnesota drain out to all the tributaries in the United States. The strategically located Kensington Stone, if placed at the head of that tributary, claims all the land downwind. So this event, the Kensington Stone being written and dated to about 1300 and something. I'm not going to find it right away. 1350 or something like that they were talking about. 1307 was the date that they broke away from the Vatican. They had the war with the Vatican, and then it was sometime thereafter, right? Kensington Roots, 1362. Here we go. The 1362. So when the Kensington Runestone was put into this claim. And of course, central to this whole thing, the XV hooked X steganography that I was showing, or I was speaking to earlier in the stream. So quite the mystery as it ties in the Mandeans and the Mandalorian, right? The Norse blood. So interestingly enough, we also have, I'm going to put up this manipulation, scandal, crime. This blockchain 101 poster, because secondly to this, we have another thing happening presciently in time right now as we course through history, and it is that our money system is changing over. Well, check this out. We're talking about V-Cipher in the first place. We're also talking about banking practices. Okay? So I want everybody to look at how close of a correlation we can draw to how blockchain operates and how the Templars' original banking transfer system worked over in the Mesopotamian area. Okay? And remember, the Templars, the Mandaeans themselves in the Mandalorian series, they kind of carry their wealth on their person so they can defend it. The Beskar steel he puts into making his very armor type thing, right? So, quite frankly, this is kind of like carrying your private keys on your person. It's really example of blockchain, in my opinion. Here's why. So I'm on page 106 in the book. King Philip was who the Templar and the church were fighting against, or the Templar was fighting against. King Philip was working with the church. Philip was out of France, and it helped instill this war in 1307 against the Templars, maybe largely due to their banking practices because they were so easily to circumvent, right? So he incited this war, kicked them out, not really realizing that he didn't really remove power from them, and it was actually their ciphering and their banking is why they were so powerful. Because as it says here, they function like a modern multinational company. Its assets, the Templars, were spread across every part of its trading empire. Medieval monarchs such as Philip were famous for keeping their wealth in huge chests at the very center of their most impregnable fortresses, but the Templars behaved in a very different way. So think about this. What they're talking about is King Philip having central control on his money. Central control on his money. And this is just like how a bank works, like Scrooge McDuck. If we go back, we were talking about this centrally dominant theme in this video I did not too long ago. The Bucky O'Hare, Jade Rabbit whole paradigm, and what that has to do with, the centralized money vault, I guess is what you called it, the big money pit that he has. This is the way the banks operate, but you can get it stolen quite easily. Like, think about how if you break into a bank in that situation, you could technically kind of empty out the vault. This has actually happened in a few DuckTales episodes where Scrooge McDuck did that. Hi, Leon, 8683. How are you? Thanks for joining the stream. We're breaking apart some Templar conspiracies today. Glad you can join us. So if they did not operate then like a central bank, like the monarchs did, and keep all of their stuff, in an impregnable fortress, how did the Templars act? Okay, so here's an example of how they worked. A merchant, they give a scenario. A merchant from Paris wishes to travel to Jerusalem, either on pilgrimage or more likely to involve himself in a trade. It would have been both foolish and dangerous for him to take a great purse of gold on his journey. The roads were dangerous and thieves were everywhere. But what could he do? He needed the money to complete his business. This is where the Templars cornered the market and built up their fantastic wealth. The merchant could go between two headquarters, one in Paris, and then handed over the gold there. He would then be given a note of cipher, a writ note of cipher. Think about it. Private key, Bitcoin, but in this case, the cipher itself is just a simple note. It's written in steganography, most likely, to where the onlooker has no idea what the heck he's reading. It's just like an inane note. It houses the password, so when you hand in the note at the other bank, at the other location, they can give you your thing. Just like reconstituting your blockchain with your private key. Okay? Do you see how this is a very blockchain practice back in 1,000 years ago when they had done this? So kind of neat. So it says, even if this note were stolen, it could be of no use to the thief because he would not be able to read the details and probably the passwords that the merchant would have to offer when presenting the note. Should the merchant, by some misfortune, lose the note he had been given, he could redeem this money later at the establishment where he'd placed it. Just like remembering your private key. Taking the note to Jerusalem, he would hand it over to the Templar headquarters there. In exchange for the note, he would be given his money in the local currency and could complete his transactions. According to Christian law at the time, it was wrong and punishable for anyone to charge interest for such a service. So the Templars did not. But the Templars got around this by manipulating the exchange rate between one currency and another, so they always got their cut for handling the transaction. So this actually does also speak to the modern art of manipulating markets. I don't know if they would manipulate them egregiously. I have no data on that, but it would seem in order to make things work out to their advantage, to where it would be worth it for them to do a practice such as this, they would cipher that money. So blockchain. We're now looking at the Templars as the original inventors of blockchain, and it puts a whole new spin on what I'm thinking in terms of the whole who is Satoshi Nakamoto. Is Satoshi Nakamoto Templar? I do think Steve Jobs, Alan Greenspan, Satoshi Nakamoto. Yeah, Alan Greenspan, Satoshi Nakamoto. 55-55, 224, right? We got V-steganography just there. And then, of course, the Steve Jobs 27-117 plus his ability, his whole role to play in the wizardry as compared to the Bill Gates paradigm is one that we have picked apart quite considerably already. So I'm actually not totally conclusive about some of this stuff yet, but they're new markers, like I said. So third point I want to cover in this is what is the plan for New Jerusalem then? Because what you have is Thomas Jefferson adding in that you have this fantastic, they need items of interest. I forgot what the quote is, that you need these items of interest and to bring them over here. It's stated in this book that New Jerusalem, their creation of New Jerusalem, is a thing of a quest of theirs, potentially. And to recreate New Jerusalem, artifacts of old were brought here. And this is what we're going to get into maybe in the next video. So I will need briefly touch on it here. But the obelisks, that get brought over here, that get replicated here, are callbacks to an ancient system. And that ancient system is the megalithic system. So if you're trying to bring back and throw over the control of time, the time warriors, the Templars, trying to throw out Chronos, the chronology, the false chronology, just like Anatoly Fomenko is trying to overthrow this false chronology with his history factor science series. Now we're looking at through that a lens by which Horus and Isis become personified as the very characters of Mary and Jesus of old, potentially, right? Like the very last saga of Egypt before it got taken over completely under Roman control. The Templars have been fighting this particular war, I suspect, on these threads for a very long time. And what that means for them is to create New Jerusalem in the already contested area of Old Jerusalem would not be wise. So why not take the objects of power, the relics of the time, and take them to New America, or New, what do they call it? New Jerusalem, New Atlantis, as Francis Bacon called it, and plant them there. If we know everything we know about the Earth grid and the energy network that is the Earth grid, what if you were to place these things, especially at a place like DC with some very significant ley lines and some very specific locations, to cause a resonance, to fight back against something that's being broadcast at the Earth from a planetary structure that resembles a musical instrument of mind control? It's interesting because the square footage of the colonial 13 colonies, the colonial United States, that was exactly the parameters. The square footage of the original United States matched exactly that of New Jerusalem, as portrayed in the Bible from a measurement perspective. Almost identical. So it is now the basis of my understanding and my research to pick open that. And there will, in fact, be one more space video with that as a transition point to a new topic, because we'll kind of close out the whole space thread with exploring that a little bit more next time. Hey, Les08, how are you? Good to have you on the stream. Good to have you on the stream. I've just got to say hi to Lasso there. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to pick that up next time. To close out our suppositions for this time. So before we get going, I have one more. Oh yeah, because we're tying these things directly into measurements. So what's interesting about, and we're going to fast forward in the book a little bit, so speak to these topics, is the very relics that they brought over were not only, the Cleopatra's Needle, the obelisks that they placed kind of like on the front cover in Central Park, but the book also talks about the construction of the obelisk in Washington, D.C., and why it was placed where it was at with the Vesica Pisces. And for that, I'm going to bring up a graphic that we can all look through right here, which speaks to some of these measurements. See the Washington Monument in the middle of these two circles. It's in the middle of a Vesica Pisces. You've got this pentagram that's not a perfect pentagram. It's more of an arrow. People who call this a pentagram don't really know what they're talking about, because it's not a pentagram. It's got a longer side on it. It resembles a pentagram, but a pentagram, again, is a perfect Pythagorean glyph. We're 108 degrees, 36 degrees, and 72 degrees, plus 1, and the measurements, the side measurements of 1 and phi are your ratios. If you do not have this construct, you do not have a pentagram, you have something else. And so a lot of people that complete that structure, the road structure there in Washington, D.C., it looks, if you look here, using the megalithic system, Alan Butler and Ann Wolter pointed out, it looks more like an arrow. Because in fact, they only used the lines in this illustration that were megalithically significant to draw. So they did not fill in like a lot of people do on the internet. This pentagram here, they only drew in the ones that were megalithically significant to the construct of this monument in particular. And frankly, this is the height, 555 feet and 55 feet wide, 555 feet tall, 55 feet wide. Interesting, because those also translate to 6,666 inches and 666 inches. And it is here within the ratios of this structure that you find pentagrams and Merkabas. Okay? So you have Merkaba, represented by Yoda, the baby Yoda, the child. And you have the pentagram just simply represented by the ether, the fifth element, the ability to use the ether as an instrument, in other words, for various things. Why is this significant? Well, because it's kind of the marker of all. So as can be seen, so I'm on page 175. I'm going to explain this a little bit further as to why this was maybe divinely made as these obelisks, not because, again, not a pentagram, looks like a pentagram, not a pentagram. What are these made in reverence to? What are these monuments made in reverence to? The goddess, Venus. The question then becomes, if these things are made in homage to the goddess, are they benevolent or malefic? And you have to kind of determine that for yourself, because we don't have the motive of the Templars currently. We would have what we would determine maybe the motive, and they're involved in the banking system reset, which is sound money. Good or bad, it is sound money. It's the correct paradigm. They seem to be involved in the technology release through the very clues they leave in time. So as can be seen from this artist's impression here is what the Washington Monument was supposed to look like, with its rotunda, and it had a flat top on it. So it didn't have that. It was kind of like, as they go into here for the whole chapter, there's some supposition that Alan Butler, the writer of the book, renders on that why the original was not set at 555 feet and 500 instead, and a project that was never going to be complete. And it turns out that maybe the plan all along was to simplify it and to make it into its divine 555 feet high. But here it says, with the benefit of hindsight, it's now possible to determine what the result of the construction was decades before. The production of a square section shaft of 500 feet with the base sides of 55 feet. Mills, who is the person who was contracted to, what was the guy's name? Something Mills. Mills is the last name of the person that was contracted to architect it. Robert Mills. He would be out of proportion and would look distinctly odd. However, if a 55-foot pyramid was placed on the top to make the monument 555 feet high on both sides, its base would be 10 times that at 55 feet, or 10 times its base, 55 feet. This is the megalithic system in play. They've written Alan Butler and Christopher Knight wrote an entire book on the megalithic system. It relies on an older form of geometry, which is more accurate and more useful in determining scale-up models of things. So you don't have to do all these conversions. It's based on a 366-degree circle rather than a 360-degree circle, and everything's basis of measurement comes out of that. So what would be really interesting to me is actually to compare what you get. I haven't done this, but on a pentagram, when you compare, instead of a 360-degree circle, what do these angles become when you take them out of that context, right? So real interesting stuff, guys. To be continued. That is very much kind of where I'm going to lend you guys some questionable hints at here. I'm gonna separate the Death Stranding stuff into a YouTube video to hopefully get some people over here. I'm going to do like a final decode on Death Stranding and share my thoughts on what timefall is and how it relates to Saturn and all this. But to close this video out, and why this 555 megalithic stuff all relates to the ether and the technology that is at the heart of the space technology paradigm, is rooted in a couple of things where we're seeing 555 as a call sign lately. So if you guys are Bix Weir followers, I would recommend you go watch his latest videos on the Theta wallets that he's tracking, because we're on the Theta platform, but there's a Theta wallet that ends in DE 555, and it is a Binance wallet. It is an original wallet, and originally had about 60 million Theta in it. It keeps getting depleted, re-siphoned, reshuffled, and resent to all these supposedly real addresses. But there's something amiss going on here. Again, with the money changing system, we have this 555 megalithic call system. Are the Templars involved with the Binance structure in some sort of way? Or is it their enemies using the same steganography? Or is it steganography at all? I truly think it is steganography, just because it would be, I think, the way that Bix is uncovering this in terms of a scam, potentially, to manipulate the markets. What did we just get done saying? The Templars manipulated markets. So could the Templars have a hand in owning Binance to manipulate markets? Yeah, probably. Why? I don't know. Are they even doing it for bad reasons? I don't know. The fact is they're manipulating it, though, and I don't know how to think about that, because this is where things start to get really hairy with the part of my journey I'm currently on in uncovering all of this stuff, is because I'm having a really hard time establishing for myself where to put an allegiance, if there is even an allegiance to be given. The Templars, it would seem, are attempting to bring the goddess energy back. It seems like they're for the Christ consciousness. Why manipulate the markets then? Is this a necessary tactic in the time being to take down the banks, and that they have a plan to right this? I don't know. I don't know. I cannot speculate as to the why, but I'm doing a pretty damn good job of speculating and uncovering, deciphering the what, the how, the when. So that's the damnedest thing about this V steganography is unverifiable to an extent. If there are other reference points, this is why I'm teaching everybody the V steganography, hopefully well enough to where you all can give me your own thoughts. Again, that's why I opened up the V steganography research V-Cipher community, so people can look at old Atlantis Rising magazines. Check these out. These old Atlantis Rising magazines. Thumb through these things. That's probably a stupid one. There's probably a better one that's Templar related that we could put up there. I think issue 42 is Templar related. Yeah, there it is. The Pirate Templar connection. So I've got this old publication. You guys can thumb through these. For instance, some of these are ads. It's a regular ass magazine, but James Clerk or Jordan Maxwell, wireless energy technology, Fulcanelli and the cathedrals, forbidden archaeology, missing casing stones, Amazons against Atlantis. So these are the types of topics covered in these magazines, and I have them all up here for you guys to course through. Help me with some V steganography. Plus, I have an immense amount of books on masonry. This is Harold Percival, a book he wrote on masonry and its symbols. The answers are scattered everywhere for us to put together, guys. But I do think that we can have a lot of fun with decoding these together. So join the V-Cipher community at the $15 level if you want to help out with the research or just discuss it at the $5. And that's kind of where my focus is going to be, is really determining what the heck's at the bottom of these 555s. Because one last thing, as people should see, Joe Rogan Experience, episode 1555 with Alex Jones. And again, this just makes me wonder, like, how entrenched is Joe a Templar. I don't know. I mean, it would take some really high level psychological. It'd almost be like, it's not impossible. All it would require is for Joe Rogan to be basically like Larry David in his ability to ad lib a script. He's genuine, he's natural, but there are certain markers in his very episodes that get hit on that are very, very curious. Remember how we're talking in the Gematria about the significance of 72 and 27 because of their relationship to the Pythagorean pentagram. 72 degrees. Flip it, it's 27. There are also 27 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and so on and so forth. Money has both of those. Money reset. 63 is the reverse of 36. You see, all of the gematria I've done on these topics in the past that relates points us somewhere in this mesh of ciphering to an answer. Okay? So this is what I'm going to leave you guys with. The clip that I'm going to play starts at 2 hours and 7 minutes in, 27, okay? This episode aired on the 27th of October, and we have 555 in the title. Listen to what Alex Jones says here at this point.
You're not necessarily, because what she's saying is...
Okay, well, I saw a clip of her in a speech saying that.
Because that's the problem with taking something out of context.
I think they're just talking about like the Ghislaine Maxwell thing here at this point, and Tim Dillon is in this podcast as well, and they're just kind of like bantering back and forth to give you the kind of setup.
What she's saying is,
he's a wonderful person.
Trump's done. No, I'm not saying that. What she's saying is that Trump has done such a shitty job. That's the reason why we're locked down. You can't go to church.
No, I get it. The headline was...
I don't know if that's true, though. I think when you got a contagious disease, you got people flying in from Europe and China and all these other countries that are expressing... You're going to have spread. I mean, this is a fucking insanely contagious disease.
Listen, Joe, one of my favorite parts of your show is when you ask Jamie for something and the light turns on when you're looking at it. Let me ask you this. You're into numerology.
How hammered are you right now?
Let me ask you this. You're into numerology. So he says it 2 hours, 7 minutes in, plus 38 seconds or so, right? Are you into numerology, is what he asks.
Kill 1 to 10.
Not at all.
We're into numerology. This is when it gets good.
You better.
Okay.
Let's talk.
Joe distracts himself by
Just be
looking
nice
at
to me, Joe.
I am being nice to you.
You got me here. I know you are. Let's get serious. Everybody wants to hear what I actually have to say.
Okay. Numerology.
What was the question? You had me on 9/11,
Yes.
1255, now 1555.
Yeah.
So 9/11 was the last show he was on last year, 1255. Remember how 125 with an extra 5 out of it, 125 is also very significant. If you, for instance, the Inner Light Star Trek episode, I've pointed this out in the past too. Inner Light Star Trek. Season 5, episode 25, production code 225. It's the 125th episode overall and the 25th episode of the 5th season. So you see how like this is all V-steganography. I did this in a previous episode, so where I showed how the 125, the 5, the 52, the 25, the 225, these are all representations in some form or fashion, an arrangement of V-steganography hiding something. So 1555, he mentions it at 2 hours and 7 minutes in on the 27th. So this is, to me, very highly coincidental that he says these things thematically to talk about all of the themes that the world's going through right now. Pretty crazy stuff. That's all. I mean, watch this episode. Alex Jones is nuts as always, and it's always a good time on the Joe Rogan Experience. Well worth the watch. Also well worth the watch the Kanye West episode from the other day. I'm blown away at how much I enjoyed that, by the way, guys. Kanye, while he's kind of like into his whole, it's the very like Jesus saved me Christian paradigm. At least it's a better, it's kind of like, it's not this path of self-determination and freedom that you and I are on in terms of the way we're framing our Christ consciousness, but he was saying some pretty cool things as it relates to just his feelings on what the world needs. taking politics out of it. I have to say, if I was a voting man, which I am not, I do not vote. I do not vote because I am an iconoclast and I fucking hate the system. There, I said it. Abolish the House, bring it back to the original vision that we had, where every person in this country was a sovereign individual. And this is where I agree with the Templars. And this is where I think I'm more for them than anything. And whatever they've got going on with this Venus family, let's bring out the secrets and upstart the Tesla tech future, I'm for. Because the path of self-determination is one that the House of Representatives took away when they came in there and they say that they can represent your interests. No, they cannot. Nobody can represent your interests. That's the false paradigm. That's what Jesus taught. So you're starting to see the truth. They still are, and this is also, I think, the Templars also seem to be followers of Jesus's actual message, and were like protectorates for his family. Pretty cool. After getting married off to Mary Magdalene, having some kids, the knowledge has to be protected somehow, and so does the bloodline. So this is all wrapped up in a lot of loose ends with this, guys. Like I said, halfway through this decode, I was going to share with you. One other thing before we leave, one other 555 aspect comes from a Robert Sepper video from earlier this year. History of Atlantis and the Lost Tribes. Thank you to, I'm actually not sure if he wants me to share his name, but you know who you are. Thank you for sharing this with me. One of my patrons. Send me an email and let me know if it's at least okay to use your fake name. You know who you are in future streams, so I can give you due credit. But here's another 555 type of a deal, and coupled with, remember how I said 55 feet at the base of Washington Monument equals 666. Okay, Avi Adams is in the chat. Okay, cool. I can say your name, I guess. Thanks, dude. I didn't know you were actually in the chat. But we're gonna see how this ties in, because just to mention, and it ties into all the other 555, 666s that I've discussed, but without also forgetting to mention that there was a whole section in this Joe Rogan podcast where they talked about 666 as well. So there you've got the 555. They were talking about 666 for a while as it relates to Jared Kushner and the speculation of like why his family purchased 666 Broadway in New York, another building. So crazy.
Moved to the nearby village of Karlstadt, where his grandson, Frederick Trump, the grandfather of Donald Trump, was born in 1869.
So here we are again, segue straight from the Trump family, extended Trump family, the Kushner family buying a property 666, the Trump family, his dad and his mother, having something to do with this little tale.
This German heritage was long concealed by Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump, after World War II, and until the 1980s, he told people he was of Swedish ancestry. Donald Trump repeated this version in The Art of the Deal, published in 1987, but later said he was proud of his German heritage. Of course, Sweden was founded by the same group of people that we call Swabians, and very few people understand what that means.
And this is an interesting thing to note. This is pretty similar to my own lineage. I've got Scottish, German, Ashkenazi Jew, believe it or not. And no, I have never done an Ancestry.com or 23andMe thing. That's messed up. Like, don't give away your data unnecessarily. But through old-fashioned things, like my grandmother's both like going back and doing actual hard-nosed research and figuring out what our family trees are that go back generations. I actually know who my lineage is, undoubtedly. I don't have to do any of that noise. And I'm like 30% Scottish, like 20%, like another 30% German, and Ashkenazi Jew, and some other stuff thrown in there. And yeah, seriously, exactly, A.V. Adams. Do not give your genetics to a company. But I know that there are some certain aspects to all these that are similar too. Like my name is actually Dutch. Believe it or not, Dutch German is where kind of the etymology of my family name comes from. And so how this all relates back in time, again, with Templar timelines, I've got to do some steadfast research to figure out like where I think my lineage may have broken away from some of this, because it does appear that maybe not while high ranking in any way amongst these societies. My family's on both my mom's and dad's side had some interplay, to say the least. So it can become quite confusing. Also, to all fairness in this video, and so people don't like look at this with too much skepticism. You could be both German and Scottish, which his mother is is Scottish as well. Scottish, his mother. Remember this. Well, maybe not in this video, but do pocket that information for maybe future videos.
That said, one needs only look at the occult, meaning hidden, symbology of the Trump Tower to gain a deeper insight into his true ancestry. Completed in 1983, it has an official height of 664 feet, but if you count its spire, however, it raises its height to 666 feet.
So there's that 666 again, right there in the Trump family. You got Kushner and 666 Broadway. That was actually the building to, fun fact, 666 Broadway was where the famous scene in The Wolf of Wall Street with Matthew McConaughey and Leonardo DiCaprio did their like the chest pounding thing. This is in that building, and apparently where a lot of secret conversations would happen. Think mic'd up room, think state secrets being parsed, intelligence gathering. Really good room for a Templar to actually have access to, right? So think about reasons beyond the numerology. The 666 is not this weird esoterically evil number. It actually veils knowledge as well. Steganography, remember the practice of, is simply hiding a message in plain sight. So by doing this is kind of this, I figure that the building that was purchased there was for that restaurant. When the Kushner family purchased that building to get the intel to insert into whatever the Trump faction needed with this presidency, as we see with the counter tactics being played with the current war. So anyway.
While 666 is called the number of the beast in most manuscripts of Revelation, a fragment of the earliest papyrus gives the number of 616 as the original number of the beast.
Interesting, right? Interesting. Not even the original number of the beast.
In a Kabbalistic context, 666 is a positive holy number associated with light, or the sun.
See, there you go. Veiling the knowledge. Where does knowledge originate? The spontaneously ether generator, the spontaneous ether generator in our sky called the sun.
And the heart chakra. 666 is also the number of the goddess, such as Ishtar, Isis, Aphrodite, and is sacred in Egyptian mythology. It's related to sex, fertility, and motherhood.
And so this is, again, why might Washington, D.C. been placed in the middle of Maryland and Virginia? Mother Mary, the Virgin. Maryland and Virginia, right between. Split the difference. Mother Mary and the Virgin. Virginia and Maryland, okay? This is, now you're starting to see where I'm picking up the thread here, guys. There's something more to this Horus and Isis mystery as it relates to the ancient Venus goddess energy that's being veiled. There's the other, it's the yin or the yin to Jesus's yang in the overall scheme of things, and is also an additional place where we can find our mysteries. But the 666 is very important to determining the next steps and why they're being broadcast in these terms of media. And you have to kind of look at what is happening in the context of this, the knowledge that's being revealed, the goddess that's coming about. The change is upon us, everybody. I am almost 100% positive at this point that I am correct in determining that 2017 to 2024 is the tribulation that was spoken of in old, and that X will cross the spot at New Madrid Fault. Something of significance will happen, and time will tell. Time will tell what we kind of get ourselves into. So expect a video from me tomorrow, guys. That's going to do it for the Patreon side, but I'm going to absolutely be going over some Death Stranding stuff to tie the Saturn myth in with the current war situation, because I've got some current war updates for the YouTubers. So I'll be doing that tomorrow. I've got that to record. I'll have 2 videos going up on YouTube tomorrow. One, which is that regular current war update, and then another one which I'm actually going to post back over here on the Theta channel, because after I'm done with it too, which is books. I've been getting so many book requests that I've got to go through and give. If I'm expecting people to be halfway decent at V-steganography, first of all, join the $15 tier and engage in some research, and you'll have access to these documents. Help me out, or start with some books I'm going to recommend. I'm going to be going through a book list tomorrow too. So I'm going to do 2 YouTube videos there. I'll figure out how to simulcast those too. I'll probably simulcast those over to Theta when I'm making them, at least. And that'll be that. But guys, this episode's in the books. Be safe, be good to each other. And again, we didn't have time to go through these UNS articles, which go through the history mystery itself. So I guess we might have to start with those next time. I'll put those over here. But again, the Templars, the temporal warriors, the battle against time. Chronos, who is Saturn, represented by time, who has the Merkaba, which is represented by 666, the shape, Merkaba, the Christ consciousness, is captured by the cube, the Borg cube that is Saturn, and mind controlling us all is my argument. So I've now built this case well enough to build upon it with more steadfast facts when I can get my hands on them. But for now, it's quite an interesting speculation, and one that I hold firm until proven to get to a better theory. Love you guys. We're gonna talk. Yeah, like I said, we're going to talk over on YouTube tomorrow about some more flat out V-steganography stuff and Death Stranding decode and blah, blah, blah. But I love you. Thanks for joining me. I hope everybody has a wonderful Wednesday night. Like 5 days till the election. So let's stay frosty out there. And if you caught the first part of this video, I'm going to do my best to get this up onto Patreon tomorrow, pending the processing time. Remember, the last video took 3 or 4 days to process, so that's the only snag when I upload the Patreon ones. Outside of YouTube, the server technology isn't as good. So anyway, take it easy, guys. I will talk to you tomorrow. Hopefully, you're also enjoying my. I'm donning the Lambda and the V-steganography shirts lately. The Ruka brand. I've got all these shirts in my closet that I hadn't worn in forever, and I was like, God damn this. I didn't even realize I was wearing V and Lambda steganography all through my 20s. So I'm going to be donning these every once in a while, just kind of like as a funny branding thing, if anybody caught that. Anyway, I digress. Take it easy, guys.